Where are we in the world economy, Paul?
I was saying to someone today, it's time to go long seashells and small bits of string. So, no, I mean, obviously things are better than they were in 2008 and late
Why
2007.
obviously?
Well, because at that point, we were really, what I think people don't realize is we were really close in parts of 2008 and late 2007 to kind of getting to a day without cash. We're quite literally, the banking system was sort of teetering at a point where it was plausible, I mean, not entirely likely, but plausible that we would have a time where you would go to a bank machine and nothing would happen. So, anything from there is progress. And so in that sense, it's progress. The trouble is that all the bad stuff, all the sort of the cancer in the system, has metastasized and moved elsewhere. And so it's mostly moved into sovereign debt, meaning at the level of governments, as opposed to being at the level of banks. The banks are marginally less wobbly than they were then. You putting in your ATM card and having no money come out is a little bit less likely. But the trouble is all of it's just moved upstream. And so that's what we're seeing now, which is this problem that people are losing confidence in the ability of governments to support all of the debt that they floated in an effort to bail out all of the banks and other broken things in the economy.
But isn't a banking crisis even is less bad than a government crisis? What happens when we go to the government ATM and nothing comes
That's
out?
the problem. So on a day-to-day basis, things are better, but in a structural level, it's much more difficult to see how things resolve themselves from here because we don't have an off-planet bank that we can use to bail out the on-planet sovereigns who are sort of screwed, right? So you don't have that option. There's no way to get outside the current box. So what that means is in the context of the current box, things have to get resolved by those sovereigns, by those countries. And the trouble there is, of course, that we've had many, many sovereign problems over history, in Argentina and Brazil, across Eastern Europe, across Western Europe. But we've never had simultaneously all of the developed economies have the same problem at the same time. Because when you run into this problem, there's nowhere to go. There's no one to bail us all out simultaneously, which means that the solution is going to be some bizarro combination of printing money, defaulting on debt, and inflation if we can get away with it. None of which are exactly pleasing solutions, but that's what's going to happen.
So what would happen if the whole world defaulted?
Well,
I mean, the Chinese wouldn't be very pleased, would they?
No, but the problem with the Chinese, everyone brings up the Chinese as the example, but the Chinese have no interest in anything. They wouldn't be happy about it, but by the same token, the Chinese are going to continue buying debt, rampantly because they have to support their current positions. They can't have that happen. It's a nice scenario. It makes for great apocalyptic muttering, but it's a very difficult thing to happen in the real world. So when you say everything defaults simultaneously or something like that, it's actually something I've talked about quite a bit, which is this idea of sort of a debt jubilee, sort of the idea that we have sort of a mass, it's not really a default, as we kind of in an interlocking way start relieving each other from our current debt burdens in the same way that banks do with mortgage holders, take it up a level, and its countries doing it with each other. And it only works if we all do it together. I can't just say, you know what, I'm out, no mas, I'm not going to pay back your debt. We have to all, because the debt's all interlocking, I hold your debt, you hold mine. And so the only way to do it is sort of as almost on a structural, kind of almost a UN sort of level, if you want to, IMF kind of level, you want to think about that way. We all kind of agree to bring it down. The likelihood of that happening is about this big. It's much more likely it ends in tears than ends in some kind of organized debt jubilee, but it's possible. It could happen.
So talk to me about these tears. What's going to happen? You've got about a minute to tell me.
So what's going to happen is sort of what I described earlier. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a wave of defaults around the world, most likely in some of the smaller Eastern European economies, less likely in the US. More likely in the US, what you're going to see is nervousness about the debt, driving up yields. The yields start to go up. The Fed responds we respond by printing money. The effect of that is to drive up inflation, and then it becomes this balancing act. Can you keep inflation under control, or do you tip over into kind of hyperinflation, or do you tip the other way, where investors around the world say, screw you, I don't want your debt anymore, and you've got a different problem where you become insolvent. You become Greece, but really, really, really big. So my hunch is it's the former. You get away with it, but it's by no means anything much better than a 60-40 proposition.
But it's all very bad, right?
All bad.
Very, very bad? As bad as 1929?
As bad as 1929, in the sense that this is really, we use the word depression like it's some kind of bad word. This is a depression in the sense that we're repudiating debt. We're all trying to unwind debt around the world simultaneously in the face of an economy and consumers that don't want to grow. That's what a depression is. I don't know why we're so afraid of the word. That's what it is. It's not a recession. If you try to apply the old medicines we used to fix a recession to the current problems, that would mean we'd want people to take on more debt. We'd want to drive down interest rates to drive the economy. That's exactly the opposite of what we want to have happen, which is we want people to de-lever, increase their savings rate, and make themselves and their companies and these countries whole again by eliminating how much debt they're currently carrying, which is the definition of a depression. It's just a word we don't like to use.
So one word answer, we are in a depression.
We're in a depression, absolutely.
One word.
Yeah.